Hello and welcome to another episode of Wholala. I'm Sam.
And I'm Alasdair.
And if this is your first time listening, we are two queer besties who love all things Doctor Who. And today we're doing something a little different on the podcast. We wanted to dedicate an entire episode to chatting about fan culture, being a part of the Doctor Who community and what it means to all of us.
Yes, we'll be looking at all aspects of Who fandom, from its queer fan base to conventions and online culture. And who better to do that with than a huge presence in the online Who community, Ethan Posford. Hi, Ethan.
Hello.
God, thank you for joining us. Very nice to have you.
I mean, huge presence in the online community. It sort of feels funny to hear that, but okay.
Does that feel like an insult? Does that feel like we're saying you're too online?
It's one of those things I feel like just sort of happens by accident. Literally, all I've done is just chat about Doctor Who a lot on my Twitter, and somehow it's just. People seem to care enough to want to read about it.
Yes.
We were saying the other day, what I'm loving at the moment is you're doing your rewatch of all of Russell T Davies' era, like leading up to the 6-year specials, and genuinely, like, it's better than like our rewatches because like you have all the clips that you've recorded as well for it, and it's just like we were saying that we'll see you post about an episode and we'll be like, oh yeah, that was a really good episode, wasn't it?
But I loved your little rewatch to series 1. Like, there were some points that I admit I did sort of end up stealing for the thread, but I mean, only because I know that the sort of kind of I sort of went into my subconscious here. That's like that totally changed the way I see these stories. But yeah, I'm towards the end of series 3 now, just about to watch Last of the Time Lords, and then it'll be, I think, Sarah Jane Adventures series 1, because I'm doing the spin-offs as well. I'm that dedicated to it, but
I love it.
What's been your favourite so far?
Good question. Like, I think there's some stories where like as a kid, you'll enjoy them, but then you'll sort of fall into the hole of criticizing them because they sort of become cool to criticize them online. Like, say the sort of thing people went through with, say, Love and Monsters, for instance. Mm-hmm. But I say New Earth is sort of an example of that, where I enjoyed it as a kid, but then it sort of became cool to criticize online. But now I'm just like, it's a fun camp episode. That is just bonkers. Like, yes, some of the logic is a bit flawed. Like, I mean, to me, it's a plot resolution where it's like, put all the medicines in one thing and it cures everyone. Like, that's my only issue. But aside from that, I'd say it's a great episode. It's a very fun story, really, and it really, stretches the acting chops of both David and Billy. Like, I just love how Cassandra pretty much just like yassifies David. Oh, I'm beating out a samba.
Beating out a samba, baby. No, I know. It's so funny watching them all back. Like, you get such nostalgia for them as a kid, and then you rewatch them and you're like, oh.
But it's also interesting to sort of watch them back and sort of have a closer eye on more of the subtext. Like, say, rewatching the series 3 finale and sort of realizing that the Archangel Network, it's sort of like an allegory of mainstream political propaganda that a lot of people fall blindly for, rather than focusing on the red flags that surround politicians. So yeah, it's sort of a nice mix of nostalgia, but also having a little bit more of a critical eye than you would have done at, say, age 7 and whatever. So
yeah, I felt that when I saw your clips come up actually the other day for The Last of the Time Lords, I was watching those clips and I was like, I know this story, but rewatching these clips now, it allows you to appreciate it in a completely new way. The scenes you were putting up specifically, where Martha is telling the Doctor, that he's got a fob watch. He's like, it can't be a Time Lord, and if it is a Time Lord, which one? And he starts shouting at her. I was like, wow, I don't remember it being this intense, but it must have been.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, I feel like as kids, we sort of naturally gravitate a lot more towards the sort of main action of the stories, which, I still do as an adult, but it's sort of great sort of be able to dissect those character moments with a bit more depth, with age, I think. Like, especially with what we know about how the Time Lords actually, were really, which we delve more into in the End of Time, really kind of show how frightening they actually are. So Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot to look at. And it's interesting, like you were saying about looking back on these things as an adult, because you, especially similar to me, work in the TV industry now. So I'm sure you're also getting a whole different like context for it and an understanding from behind the scenes of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is a very bizarre experience, but but also the best. Like, but yeah, for those who don't really, I don't know me or be following me around, yeah, I'm a runner in the TV industry. I've mostly worked in unscripted entertainment type things, so stuff like, say, Children in Need, Comic Relief, and most recently Eurovision. But yeah, it is a bizarre thing because like my first paid TV job, which was Children in Need, just gone. So yeah, with the BBC, yeah, I remember doing the Graham Norton special, which is where they get a load of kids sort of sit on the Graham Norton stage while some celebrities sit in the red chair. And amongst those celebrities, who do we have? None other than Mandip Gill, of course. Which was it was sort of surreal to have that on. Well, what was my first paid TV job, but also my second show that I worked on. But yeah, like that was very lovely though, because I had met Mandip before that point at a convention. So when I saw her again, I was like, hey, you've actually met before. How you doing? And sort of like showed our photos together, which is very lovely. And, you know, like it was a very brief conversation, but it's more of, like thank you for being in the show. Because obviously by then Power of the Dogs was recent. So I was just telling her how amazing she was in the episode. So yeah, like that was very sweet. And then 2 weeks later, there were sort of murmurings in the production office for the show about about some sort of secret project, which was spoken about by some of the producers. I mean, I had my suspicions of what it might be, but I didn't want to sort of read into it too much. But then I woke up on the Friday morning, opened Twitter, and it was like, meet the new Doctor Who companion on Children in Need, and it's sort of like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And like a lot of the crew on that show is knew how much of a fan I was. So as soon as I got into the studio, they're like, "Even have you seen? Like, yes, of course I've seen." But yeah, it was a very surreal thing though, because as I was saying, it was my first paid TV job, and sort of being in the studio watching the seeing the TARDIS there in the studio during rehearsals, because they were rehearsing that day with like a stand-in for the companion. I mean, they still kept it very secretive even to the end. Like, I still found out at the exact same time everyone else did. Like, apparently they brought her in under a blanket. It was like that secretive.
Did you, what did the stand-in look like? Was it even a Millie Gibson lookalike or completely different?
Literally nothing like her. I think they just picked up what won the floor team to just stand in. It was like some guy in his like 30s, 40s or something.
Nice.
It is crazy how you've now been stacking up your credits and been working on so many amazing shows, but throughout so many of them, you've kind of fallen into like Doctor Who adjacent work, where you've never worked on Doctor Who, but you've now worked with the TARDIS and Millie Gibson and the Dalek and David Tennant and like Catherine Tate sort of the other day.
Yeah, like the Dalek and David Tennant were another couple of surreal things. Like I remember like looking at the call sheet for the Eurovision sketch for Comic Relief and seeing like Nicholas Briggs on the call sheet. I mean, to be fair, like it was a pretty crazy call sheet to begin with, because we had likes of S Club 7, we had Fleur East, we had we had Miranda, like all these different names there. But yeah, like it was a very fun day though. We had John Davey, one of the operators from the show, it was also like various aliens in the Sarah Jane Adventures and other episodes of Doctor Who, etc. And he was just telling me like various stories of what it's like to work on the show. Like say in Revolution of the Daleks, when they're on the Bristol bridge, what's the bridge called?
I'm not going to remember this bridge, I'm sorry.
But yeah, it was on the bridge in Bristol. It was a night shoot, and he was showing me photos of how they had to like out in between takes, they had to like eat inside the little Dalek tasting things, like which was pretty amusing to sort of see little photos from that. And yeah, Nick was very lovely as well. It was very surreal kind of getting to watch him on set actually doing the voice. Like obviously they could have easily added it in post or whatever, but there's just such an atmosphere to having him actually there, you know. And then, yeah, David Tennant, who, well, Sam's also worked with as well.
Yeah.
Colleagues to us
Wicked.
both.
I'm the only one here who's not worked with David Tennant.
one day, Alasdair, we'll somehow make it happen.
I hope so.
We'll get his people to meet with your people.
I would hope so.
But yeah, like David, I think was probably the surrealist one of them all. But obviously, he was my doctor really, because my first episode was actually Gridlock in series 3, and I sort of carried on from there. But obviously, I went back and watched series 1 and 2 as well. But yeah, like it was a very surreal thing. I mean, I'd already met him by this point at Comic-Con, so when I first saw him again, I sort of showed him our photo, and that did seem to jog his memory a bit, because he did tell the other runners we were with that they did remember me, which is very sweet. But yeah,
That's
it is one of
lovely.
those things where you grew up with someone, and all of a sudden, like you're just walking down a corridor and you're like, "Hi, David," like so like he's your workmate, which well in this instance he kind of is. But
When I met him, for me, it genuinely felt like meeting. It's how I assume royalists feel if you met the Queen. Like, I genuinely, like, he came into the production office and he was super nice. He's like, "Hey, everyone, how you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. And, like, my palms just went clammy and I got very hot and I started, like, shaking. And I, again, like, to him, I was very like, "Hi, David, how are you? Like, nice to see you. You're David, all right?" Like, very professional and very this and that. And then he left and I just kind of was like, like, having to, like, contain it all in.
I mean, you know, from my experience of actually being present in front of royalty for Eurovision, I'd say David Tennant feels more like royalty than the actual royalty did. So there we go.
Wow. There's a comment. There's another little like subtle name drop there. Like, having been in front of royalty, by the way, I've also done that.
Talking about like fandoms and being a fan of Doctor Who, so many people, like you were saying, dream of getting to meet these people, and then you and I are lucky enough that in our industry we get to meet them at work. But as you mentioned, you've been like a frequent visitor of conventions. How have you found like going to like a Doctor Who event and suddenly being surrounded by like exclusively Doctor Who fans and cast and everything? Because I've not been to one. I've not actually been to a convention, and I'm very like excited and hoping that this will be the year that changes that. But what's your experience of that been?
I feel like conventions are a little bit different to working with the cast, I think, just because when you're at work, you've sort of got to be a bit more focused on the job rather than having time to really fanboy over certain people, which, I mean, well, naturally, me being me, I've sort of tried to keep a balance of that. But yeah, but I feel like at convention, you're sort of more free to say the things that you want to say. I mean, obviously, only if they're, you know, like nice things, really. Like, you know, you don't want any of that. So, but yeah, like that's something I sort of only got into in sort of recent years. I mean, I started out more with the small conventions, like say there's the Phantom events people. So like they're like a small company, small signings with. It's mostly like classic Who stars, but there's also some new Who ones, but it's mostly like say background characters or whatever. But yeah, I remember my first one. I met John Leeson, the voice of K9, and he's very sweet. And yeah, Casey Manning as well, who was so lovely. And I feel like a lot of people you know, in the fandom can agree that she's sort of like the grandma of the Doctor Who fandom.
Yeah.
Like she like it's just so lovely how she tries to make the time for, you know, everyone. She's always very active on Twitter as well, and like I've seen people sort of like bring up their, you know, personal problems to her, and she's always been there, sort of like a nice little comfort for them. And yeah, she famously gives great hugs, which unfortunately I wasn't able to get the first time that I saw her because this was when we were edging out of lockdown. But I did get one from her in November, which is nice. So there we go. But yeah, she's very sweet. So if you've not met her already, then please do something about it, because honestly, you're missing out. So
She was actually at one of the Gallifrey cabaret events we've been talking about previously, these amazing Doctor Who drag nights. And she gave away some, I think, gifts for the raffle, the charity raffle they did then. One of those gifts has now kindly been donated to me because the winner of that gift realised that I'd probably like it more than they did.
what was the gift?
The gift is some action figures, which include Joe Grant, the Third Doctor, the Brigadier, and Katie's actually signed the box, and that now lives in my room, kind of one of my most prized possessions.
But yeah, it starts off with the small conventions. But yeah, the big conventions themselves are a very different experience. I feel like some of the stars do sort of get rushed along a bit more because so many more people. Whereas I think Katie Manning with the smaller ones, like Was Lovely was, she sort of gave a bit more time for the people in the queue because she's sort of able to, like, like giving them a decent amount of time to actually have a good chat. But still, though, like with the big conventions, that they're still great in their own right. Like even if like sometimes the sort of handling and staffing them has been a bit mixed across some fans. Obviously, I know some of the staff can be a bit rude to people waiting here or there, but I mean that's a whole different conversation because like, that's not something I've been personally involved in myself, so that's not really something I can really speak of really. So I think recently I was really been in love with how Jodie's taken on these big conventions because like her first one, like she was technically still the current Doctor when she went, like, you know, like Legend of the Sea Devils and Power of the Doctor was still yet to air. But but you can tell how much she really cares about the show and about her role in the show. That's the first opportunity she had to go to one, she did it. Because I got a photo and an autograph with her. Like when I got the autograph, like I was only able to speak to her like very briefly, but you could really tell how she was trying to make like every second of every fan, you know, as precious as possible. Like, and
oh god, she's such a gem.
If you look at all the photo ops that she has with all the different fans, you can just see her putting like 110% into the energy she brings in.
Yeah, I think you always hear Doctor Who cast members saying that when they're making Doctor Who, it always feels like they're kind of working inside this little bubble for kind of like 9 months to a year, and it always feels like they're making this really like intimate little show despite kind of the huge scale of it and the budget, because they're working with this kind of very similar cast every day. They're working in Wales in this kind of like lockdown studio, sometimes on location, and it feels like when that show then gets like released to the world and they see the fan reaction, it can actually be really overwhelming because they feel like, oh my god, like suddenly this little show we were working on is like suddenly like out in the public domain, and like there's this massive reaction. And the second thing is that it feels like we've been really lucky with definitely all the Doctor actors, but also I think like the key companions around them. Like we've had really nice actors take on those roles, and it feels like we've had really warm people kind of steward the show forward.
100%, yeah. Like that whole small bubble thing, I think after working in this industry, yeah, I do sort of have a understanding of what that sort of feels like, because like I'd work on something like, say, Comic Relief or Eurovision, and then actually watching people react to it online, it's all like, hold on a second, people are actually watching this. But obviously I'm only speaking about this from a behind the scenes perspective, so I can imagine what it's like sort of be the sort of like custodian star of the show that say, you know, like Jodie was, and obviously now Shooty's sort of beginning with in the reigns of his tenure. And I do love how much respect and love for the show he's already showing, like to the point where I think there was someone who was like receiving hate in their Instagram DMs based on like one of his posts. So and he reached out to them, sort of comfort them, which is very sweet, and I feel like it sets like a good, you know, it sets himself up as such a good role model for the role. And we've still only seen like 2 seconds of screen time with him.
I just think that the show is, I think he's going to be a great like captain to steer the ship.
Gallifrey Cabaret, actually, segueing into that, is where I first met you, and that was a great kind of fan experience for us as well.
That's not true, Ellen. That's not true.
It's not true! I just realised it's not true.
I mean, we first met, I think a few days before, after I'd sort of, when you're handing back the stuff you borrowed from me for the photo shoot.
You're right. I'm so sorry. We borrowed very kindly when we were doing the new photography for Wholala Season 2. We borrowed Ethan's incredible cosplay collection of outfits so that we could use them in our photo shoot. And when we were giving back the clothes, we had a little pint with Ethan in East London, which was super lovely. And I'm so sorry that I forgot that was when we first met.
But it was so close. Like I remember it was only a few days before Gallifrey Cabaret, so we literally were speaking to you and we were like, see you at Gallifrey Cabaret. And that was the first time we got to properly like socially hang out in like a setting outside of a Wholala thing. So when we actually did see Ethan for a second time, Alasdair, at Gallifrey Cabaret. I think we'd never been to one before. We've spoken about it on the podcast before, and actually, this is a little teasing exclusive for the listeners. As we kick off Pride Month next week, we actually have the co-hosts and founders of Gallifrey Cabaret on Wholala, so that's something to look forward to. Little teaser there. But I feel like that we spoke about it on the podcast so much because we loved it. It feels like we designed a night out. Like, it was the perfect queer, fun event for Doctor Who, and I think that it's so interesting, and I've only really noticed it as an adult, that the Doctor Who fandom is so queer. Like, it's so diverse, and I just can't think of many other shows that are not like a quote-unquote gay show or whatever. Like, that's not the point of the show, but that consistently have this queer following. I'd be interested to hear your insight into, like, whether you've noticed that as well, or why you think that might be.
Before I talk about that, I'm just say, I mean, obviously, shouts out to Reese and Carrot for timing the next Gallifrey Cabaret event literally days after London Pride. Like, we are in for a hell of a party that month.
Yeah.
But yeah, answering your point, Sam. Yeah, like, I feel like it is something that I sort of grew to notice as time went by. Because obviously, like, as a kid, you're not really sort of thinking about that stuff as much, really. But I feel like watching Russell's first era, like, say, Jack, for instance, or say, like, Jack kissing the Doctor and passing the ways, that sort of thing. Like, somehow that sort of stuff, I don't know, it never felt, it kind of felt like it was there. Like, I don't know, like, maybe I did notice it a little bit the first time or two, but I don't know, it just sort of feel easy just to, I don't want to say shrug off, because shrug off just but you know what I mean, sort of easy, sort of just go with it and just be like, yeah, like, this is the thing. It
happened. It wasn't a big deal. Like, it didn't seem like a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as a teenager, watching Torchwood, because obviously I was too young to watch it when it first came out, but yeah, watching it as a teenager, one of the things I did love, in particularly with series 1 actually, is how basically all of the main characters at some point or another do have a same-sex kiss, whilst a lot of them also have established connections with with like opposite sex partners. So it sort of shows us as an audience, like, how fluid sexuality can be, and it's not just fixed in one place. And I think the fact that the sexuality of the characters is rarely questioned was sort of very refreshing about it as well, because it's like it just exists in this little part of the Doctor Who universe, really. And I feel like that sort of kind of helped me come to terms with my sexuality later on. Well, I say later on because obviously, well, like many of the queer people out there, sort of spent a lot of years sort of in denial about it, really. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I feel like sort of having a bit of a having a strong queer presence in the fan base, I think, yeah, it did sort of help me come to terms with my sexuality, and obviously, I'd obviously seen that come into the show, more recently with prominent characters like say with Bill and then later Yaz. I mean, debatably with Clara, although to be honest, I wasn't the biggest fan of how it was handled with Clara, because it felt like it was used as an expense for a joke. But I guess there's a little part of me that sort of appreciates them trying there, but even if the execution was a bit off. But yeah.
The execution was a little clumsy.
That's very politically correct.
I think I prefer how they handled it in Series 9 and say when they first introduced her as Oswin in Asylum of the Daleks. And she's like, oh, first boy I fancied was called Rory. No, actually, no, wait, she was called Nina. I was going through a phase. And it's like, as a bisexual, like, before figuring it out, you're sort of conditioned to think whether attraction to whatever gender you're feeling is just a phase. Like, because there were a lot of times growing up where it's like sort of flipping in between sort of like, I'm actually gay, or I know flips back is like, oh, wait, so I'm actually straight after all. I sort of like, that expectation of something being a phase sort of stops you from coming to that conclusion for a while. But yeah, I feel like characters like, say, Bill and, well, later Yaz as well, sort of really, like, they were a very positive influence on the fandom in general. Like, there were a lot of people really seeing themselves, because obviously we had Jack before, which, like, as a character, obviously, I'm not talking about the actor, as a character, like, he was very important to like, a lot of queer people's upbringing, but he was more of an occasional companion, whereas I think having a prominent companion, like say Bill, for instance, be sort of like out and proud from the start, really helps. And looking back on it, like I remember a lot of people complaining about series 10, saying how Bill brings up her sexuality in a lot of episodes. But the reality is, like, as queer people, we don't come out once and then it's over with. Like, depending on what situation we're in, we sort of find ourselves coming out multiple times. So looking back and like now that I am openly queer, like it does make a lot more sense to me, really. So
it's a tricky line to walk, especially on a show like Doctor Who, because I feel like you want to credit them where they're trying, because any representation is important, but then I think you also need to, as a showrunner, when you hear comments about how things like the comments about Clara and like you were saying about New Girl get made and they cut and they hurt in an unintentional way, I think it's really important for them to listen and adapt. And I do think that Bill was their real stab at saying, okay, we're going to properly establish a queer regular character, like a regular companion. And I think it was important that she spoke about her sexuality as much as she did. And I did hear the same criticisms that people were like, oh, she's just like the quote unquote, the lesbian, like that's her whole character. But you made a really good point where you were saying you never come out once, you're coming out all of your life. And it's something that I think that a lot of straight people don't, they just take for granted. They don't have to do that. They don't even think about it. So whether or not it's sometimes clumsily handled, I think it is something that the fans need to like take note of, that, okay, well, at least there are positive changes. And I think that, the writing now, especially within Jodie's era, was so much better. I think the way that her and Yaz's relationship was dealt so much better than like Clara's, for example. I'm assuming Yaz is a bisexual character. And I just think like you can see the leaps and bounds from like maybe 5 or so years of difference in writing. So I can only hope that going into, say, Russell T Davies' new era, the writing for queer characters is just going to be so much more real and meaningful and true to the experiences of the queer viewers.
I'd really love to see Russell write a character sort of similar to Bill. Like I feel like a character like Bill would have fit in perfectly with his style as well. But yeah, going over to Yaz, I think what's special about Phasma, like whether or not you agree with the execution, I think why special is the way is the way the fans did sort of manifest it from the start. Like I think Magnet Gill sort of admitted that even in series 11 she sort of played it in a way that sort of hints the idea of it. I think it is so amazing how in this instance we had a creative team that actually listens to the audiences and sort of gave them what they wanted. I mean, once again, obviously, like I know everyone's sort of mixed on how it was handled, but I just remember the sort of special feeling that sort of came on the evening that Eve the Dalek came out, and just seeing a load of people over Twitter sort of feeling very seen in the moment where Yaz does confess her feelings to Dan. And I think what's special about it is the way that there is tension in there, but it's not because Yaz is queer, it's because she's in love with the Doctor, who's her best friend. And obviously we know how complicated of a person the Doctor is and how complicated a relationship with them can be, based on previous relationships we've seen, like say with Doctor and Rose, Doctor and River, that sort of thing. So I think it's sort of nice to see a queer relationship explored in a way where the tension doesn't come down to that it's a queer relationship. It's just the complexity of one of the characters involved in that relationship. Really, I feel like after Phasmin, I just can't imagine them going back to another heteronormative relationship for a while. Yeah. And I think I don't know what it is, but with Ncuti's Doctor, to be fair, we haven't seen him in action yet, but I personally couldn't imagine him being with a woman. I mean, if they did, obviously, kind of said, I'm not in a rush for it to happen. I'm saying if it did have to happen, then yeah.
I'm quite a fan of the asexual Doctor. I think I've said before, I quite like the Doctor just sort of being a bit like almost beyond traditional human relationships and just whizzing around and almost just kind of being kind of like, I don't have time for that stuff. And, I feel like the like sudden emergence of like David Tennant's Doctor being such a slut was just like so from nowhere, it almost felt. But But yeah, I'm open to anything. I think, like, listen, I mean, that'll drive a certain segment of the fan base absolutely bananas, and all the better for it.
Yeah. Off the back of that, I think that we can all agree that it looks like we're going to get amazing representation coming in from Russell's era. We're hoping for more queer representation. We're obviously getting representation of disability. I was just going to ask you, Ethan, is there any more type of representation you would like to see in Doctor Who, be it sexuality or neurodivergence or characters from different places? What would you like to see in the upcoming series?
With Frisch Stindl's era, I did like how it did make strides sort of bring about more neurodivergent representation. I mean, again, there were some misfires, like say with Ryan, but I did love the intention behind it. And I think with Ryan though, like the problem that I get sometimes with the way he's criticized is some people say, he's terrible at doing this, but apparently he can do this, and it's like, yeah, but that's not how dyspraxia works really. Just because you're dyspraxic doesn't mean that you've got terrible coordination in literally everything. Like, there's just some things you can do naturally better than others. And I think with the way his story ended, which, I mean, I think I appreciated more on a rewatch than, say, initial watch. Yes, we still see him struggle to ride a bike, but, like, that's... the point of that ending isn't that he's supposedly able to magically ride the bike by now. Like, that's not the point of the ending. Like, I feel like the point I'm making there is, like, yes, he's still gonna struggle with certain things because of his dyspraxia, but he's not gonna let that weigh him down. I know, like, he's still gonna keep going at what he wants to do. Which which I think is a very nice, mature message to have. And yeah, like, admittedly, I do wish they did more with the aspect of his character, but I do appreciate the intention they had with him. And I did like how they ended his character in that kind of way. So yeah, like, going forward, I think it'd be nice if Russell did continue telling similar stories of that kind of thing, like with the 13th Doctor and also with the 12th Doctor as well. Like, a lot of neurodivergent fans, myself included, sort of did see similar traits in them, really. Like say their occasional struggles sort of with like certain social cues, funny innocent little moments like that, which feel like we can have a bit of a laugh about, because sometimes we do sort of mess up on some social cues, or like or can take things like a little bit too literally or whatever. But I think also the chaotic thought process that 13 has, like, sometimes I sort of get that when I'm in a bit of a rush about something. But also, like, there's instances where both the 12th and 13th Doctors, they sort of struggle to really formulate their emotions, which I feel like sometimes I've had that in the past. Like, sometimes the way I respond to things may not be in the same way. Yeah, so I have noticed how that those sort of things have meant a lot to certain fans, and there's other fans who may not get it in the same way. There's some scenes, particularly in the 13th Doctor's era, where fans have been more critical of 13's characterization, whilst other fans who are neurodivergent, who see a lot of traits in her, will disagree and give reason for why it resonates with them. But with the 13th Doctor and also the 12th Doctor, I sort of appreciated how they sort of had their own insecurities that they sort of had to learn to really overcome and sort of just embrace who they are, which I feel like I can sort of relate to that, because to put it simply, like, growing up and going to school, like, I didn't necessarily have the best time there because of how different I felt to other people. But I think growing up, I sort of learned to just go with it and just, well, as corny as it sounds, just be me. Like,
Yeah.
It
makes me really happy to hear you talk about seeing positive representation on screen, both for neurodivergence and also with your sexuality, because I completely agree. And I think that I've noticed that there are a lot of queer Doctor Who fans and a lot of neurodivergent Doctor Who fans. And I think that the character of the Doctor, even if they aren't necessarily, like, I'm not necessarily talking about their sexuality, like, say, using 13 as an example, not talking about her relationship with Diaz, but just in the way that she carries herself and the things she does. So many people can relate to that. The way that the third Doctor is very flouncy with his frills, and it's, have you tried this cheese and wine? It's delicious. It's like it's very camp, and a lot of queer people can see that and kind of, even if they're not being told like this is a quote unquote gay character, a lesbian character, whatever, they see aspects of themselves in that person. And it makes me really happy to hear you talk about 13 and 11 and see how behavioral traits they might have someone could relate to and see aspects of themselves on screen. And I think that it's really important to be able to see yourself on screen, and it makes me happy that you relate.
As a character for the Doctor is how they're like always unashamedly themselves. Like, say, the 10th Doctor will sort of like go on with all the sort of like, you know, geeky techno jargon, whilst all his friends around him are sort of like, what? and then you'll have 11 putting out all his city hats and whatever, and they got like Clara someone being like, someday you'll just walk past a fez. It's like, nope, never gonna happen. And then what else? You got like the 12th Doctor sort of like unashamedly, you know, playing guitar on a tank, sort of just like living his best life that way. Which, you know, like I know fans have been mixed on in the past, but you know, I've sort of grown to enjoy it. And then then we've got the 13th Doctor, who like generally has like a lot of sort of cute little bursts of sort of like childlike excitement, like, you know, when the Kablam man arrives and she's like, it's the Kablam man. Considering like further down in her tenure, she sort of kind of goes through a bit more of an angsty phase. It's sort of nice to have a bit of a balance, you know, with those, you know, various incarnations, I think. And yeah, I feel like a lot of, you know, queer and neurodivergent people sort of naturally see themselves in them for those types of reasons, really. Like, you know, like aside, like, you know, I've always sort of seen neurodivergent traits in the Doctor, like particularly 11, 12, and 13, I think. But also, there is something about the Doctor as a character that does feel intrinsically queer. Like even before 13, like I always sort of felt that in a way. Like maybe just out of their sort of open-mindedness and sort of the way they sort of seem flexible about all ways of life. And maybe also the 11th Doctor being unafraid to just make out with Rory. It was like, good thinking.
Rory was shocked. Rory did not consent to that.
Rory was
gooped and gagged.
I mean, apparently that was unscripted. Like apparently that was Matt's idea to do that. So
I think it was. Yeah, I love it. Matt Smith does seem like the kind of person that would just randomly turn to Arthur Darvill and be like, "Give me a smooch.
Let's kiss."
Off the back of that, you were saying about how Twitter, you'd mentioned that Twitter like always has online discourse. I'd be really curious to hear your opinion on what you think of like online discourse of Doctor Who, because I think that personally, from my experience, we always kind of joke we're like Twitter is a hellhole, and then we'll be like TikTok is really fun and Instagram is this, and I think different social media platforms give off a different vibe for everything, like not just in Doctor Who, but specifically in the Doctor Who fan base. I see so many amazing things and also so many really like toxic things within online culture. Like I've met people like you, like we met online, and certainly doing the Doctor Who podcast, I feel like we've met so many amazing people, loads of queer Doctor Who fans, and really sort of gotten in touch with that. But you also see so much hate online, specifically like towards the cast, but also you see it recently towards fans. And I've seen people commenting on, you know, people's cosplay and saying, well, that's not real, like you shouldn't wear that because they wouldn't wear that, or you can't wear that because you don't look good in that. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about why, specifically within the Doctor Who fan base, online culture varies so widely between being so toxic to also such an incredible and beautiful thing.
At the best of times, it can be a very positive place. Like I think, especially over in lockdown, which is when I think I sort of started to find myself falling down that rabbit hole.
The lockdown rewatches, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, shout out to Emily Cook, by the way, if she somehow listens to this. I doubt she is. But yeah, I remember meeting her actually outside the Power of the Doctor premiere, and I did give her a little thank you for all those rewatches, which is very sweet about it. But yeah, I feel like you know, lockdown, obviously we've gone through a lot of, you know, sudden change, which obviously, you know, different people were sort of handling that in their own different ways. Like I know some people might have seen it as you know, a bit of a break from work and that, which, you know, like you know, fair play. But obviously there are people who sort of panicking. Obviously their way of life had suddenly just been turned on its head. Like, that's sort of how I felt in a way. Like, there was just a lot of uncertainty, which was sort of scaring me. So I feel like Doctor Who, like, it was sort of a nice little comfort, sort of have something going on there, sort of keep us going. Like, obviously with the rewatches, but also the way that the creatives were still trying to make new content to go with rewatches, like all different minisodes and stuff. Like,
I loved them.
Like, a particular standout was the Farewell Sarah Jane one. That felt very special, sort of actually have some closure to the show in that kind of way.
I cannot watch it without crying. I cry every time I watch it.
In lockdown, I was a very anxious bean when that all kicked off. My one of my full nightmare scenarios, like before COVID kicked off, was like the idea of a pandemic. When I was like 12, I was very traumatized by the show Survivors that they had done as a remake, where this kind of virus wipes out 97% of the population, and that was truly like my worst nightmare. Like, I know some people are very scared of like zombies, whatever kind of scenario it is, nuclear war. My thing was like pandemic. I was like terrifying. So when that started to kick off,
it's never gonna happen.
It's never gonna happen. It's all fine. But when that kicked off, I was like, oh my god, it's happening. And like the topsy-turviness of everything was so unsettling, like everything kind of slowly shutting down, then full lockdown, then how long is this going to go on, really, really rattled me. So the rewatches and those kind of like moments of kind of unifying things that made everyone feel a bit more together, especially like during those very lonely times where we couldn't really see each other, and when the initial novelty had worn off and, the kind of Zoom quizzes had started to wind down. Those things, I found those really helpful. My rewatch actually wasn't Doctor Who at the time. It was the Eurovision rewatches that were being organised.
Yeah, you were speaking about that in the last episode. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, they kind of every week would announce like, this year we're going back to blank, and they'd kind of, someone in the comments would like find the link. And there was a great one. We went back to Eurovision 2004, and our UK entry was Daz Sampson, I think, with... can't remember what the name of the song is, but it was about, like, what did you learn in school? It's a trash song, but I loved it back in 2004. And so much fun to just watch along and have a camp all time. Like, those things were great. Like, it's not something that you can replicate outside of a pandemic, I think, but such fun, unifying moments.
Yeah, I remember Jodie making that video of her in the cupboard dressed in the costume, sort of reassuring everyone, which is very sweet.
Yeah.
Because,
oh my God, that was one of the loveliest things ever.
Because, going back to what we were saying, how the actor playing the Doctor has to sort of be that role model outside the show as well. It was sort of very, very special seeing Jodie being the Doctor to everyone, but it was just so a real life situation everyone is nervous about. So, but yeah, like it can be a very positive experience, and I think with say both Jodie's era, but also the incoming new era with Ncuti, like there is a lot of criticism for different reasons for both those eras. I think ultimately, like, as long as the criticism is sort of fair and you're not telling people that you're dumb for like a certain part of the show, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I think where it goes wrong is when, like, it feels like some fans have sort of been diminished just for enjoying something that other people didn't. I think with Doctor Who, because there's so many different eras that have different styles, different approaches, sometimes it has to like it's become a bit of a competition of like which era is more progressive, which era has more consistency, that sort of thing. And ultimately, we put it down, it is all the same show, and like
literally,
if we thought about it more, I feel like there'd be a lot less conflicts. I think
if I hear one more person go like, Doctor Who died after 2017, I'm so done with it.
Grow up.
But yeah, it is interesting though, because obviously I've been a fan for 16 years now. So obviously I know a lot of people who say I stopped watching when David Tennant left, and then people who say I stopped watching when Matt Smith left, and then Peter Capaldi. So yeah, like it's sort of like I don't know. I feel like as a teenager, like it was sort of hard for me to get used to the idea that Doctor Who was no longer the same. It no longer had the same mainstream hype that it did during Russell's first era. But I feel like, kind of as time's gone by, I've sort of learned to sort of trust my more, gut opinion on on every era myself rather than just follow the crowds. But yeah, ultimately though, it can be a very positive place. Like I sort of see, when some like generally when people have sort of faced online hate or whatever for whatever reason, pick them up for it. Like for instance, I remember, so I stood outside the Power of the Doctor premiere and I met a lot of the crew of that, and also Sacha Dhawan as well. And there was a photo of me and Christian. Basically, like not too long before then, I can't remember how, but somehow I got into like an online row with some of like some of the like anti-Jodie people. And then one of them sort of ends up picking up that photo of me and saying like this is an example of astroturfing, like suggesting I was planted to be a fan of the show for the sake of this era or something. It's like, what? I've been a fan for
that is wild.
We're in conspiracy territory here,
because like they picked up this image like with like no consent from me and like used it to sort of further some like fake point they were trying to make about me. But it was very lovely to sort of have the support from a lot of people in that situation, because I feel like over Jodie's era we sort of seen those types of people sort of become more vocal, so we're sort of more used to sort of like cover each other's backs when those sort of people sort of enter our sphere. So like I think at the best of times it can be one of the most positive, wholesome fandoms out there, because like it does really embrace, it's very like the show it's very all encompassing of different walks of life. Like there was something Jodie did say, I think maybe it was around the time she was first cast or series 11 or something. She was saying how the show is a celebration of representation at an epic scale, which is interesting because it's something that's, I feel like as a fan base maybe we didn't really think about so much before, but I do sort of love, like obviously I know people had mixed feelings on the last era, but I do love how those sort of conversations did sort of change the way we looked at the show and the fan base itself. So I feel like that's definitely one of the main positives I can pick out from that era of the show. So
for me, the thing with toxic fan culture that's so frustrating is I think this gap between having an opinion on a show which you adore, which is of course completely valid. That's why we have a whole podcast to discuss our thoughts and feelings. Of course, that's like something we should do. And I think even expecting kind of like high standards from kind of industry leading media, right? So like when people talk about kind of like the quality of Marvel movies, like given that those are movies that kind of block out cinemas for days or weeks at a time, like I guess in a way it makes sense that people can be critical of kind of the quality of those movies. I get that as well. But it's that moment where you move beyond kind of this is my opinion and how I feel and into I'm objectively right about this, and if you disagree, here's what's personally wrong with you. I find that so frustrating, like the inability to recognize that.
Yeah, like I agree there, because ultimately like TV is a form of art and art is subjective, so like like even if a certain form of art is generally received a certain way, I don't know if you can really say like it makes it objectively bad. Like obviously everyone gets different things out of whatever that they're consuming, so so it does annoy me when like when like I don't know, someone will say to me, "Oh, this episode or this series is poorly written." I was like, "Yeah, like that's that's your opinion, which is fair enough." I was like, "No, it is objectively
you are wrong."
I don't appreciate attempts I think that people make in kind of the Doctor Who fan community to try and kind of divide people up into kind of different like little camps of kind of so-and-so stands or so-and-so defenders or whatever. I'm just like, listen, it's a great fun show. It's got a very long history. It's impossible to try and like, categorize fans into different kind of camps here. It all relies on change, experimentation, different eras.
I think ultimately one of the comforting things about growing up and sort of becoming more involved in the online fan base is because, once sort of hit the teenage years, and Doctor Who didn't have quite the same mainstream appeal that it has in Russell's first era. Like, I think at school, as you get older, it's sort of like the show sort of become less cool. I remember, secondary school age sort of being ridiculed for still enjoying the Peter Capaldi era. It has been lovely sort of find that sort of space online as I've got older, and obviously sort of realizing that a lot of the fan base is actually very queer, very neurodivergent as well. And I think what is lovely is how the character of a Doctor, as I was saying before, like they've always been very much sort of an outsider in a way, that it sort of made a lot of the people who felt like outsiders in society for different reasons sort of feel less alone and less like that when they come together. So I think one of the beauties of the show is the way it sort of can bring those people together. I feel like the show has been responsible for quite a good portion of some of my close friendships, really. Some of my close friends who I made at uni were sort of similar to me, that kind of way, sort of neurodivergent or queer or a bit of both, who are into the show. And similarly, I've sort of found other people sort of through these online spaces because of this, because of this shared passion, say you guys, for instance. So I think that is sort of the main beauty of the Doctor Who fandom in a way. And I hope I've sort of given it some justice. I've not been rambling on back to you.
Of course you haven't.
You have you've put things in better words than I would have ever done it. You've been very, very well thought out with all your points. I think I kind of just sort of start talking and hope my brain follows with it, but you've been very succinct.
Me too.
Well, Ethan, I could talk to you about the Doctor Who fandom for years. I could talk to you about anything for years. But I am,
and we plan to.
And I plan to.
By the way, we plan to.
But I'm afraid we only have the one episode of Wholala with you today. But thank you so much for coming on. We genuinely, I can't harp enough about the fact that your perspective on these things has been so interesting and well thought out. And you're welcome back on the podcast whenever you want.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, thank you so much for having me. I feel like there's very few people who will willingly put themselves in front of me and natter about Doctor Who for an hour. But
we love it.
But I'm very grateful that that's you guys. So there we go.
Thank you. We're so grateful for your time on a Sunday as well, a day of rest, but not
for us.
But no, Ethan, we love it. We love speaking to you always. It's always a pleasure to run into you at these events, and we always love seeing your rewatches as well. I'll say as well, here's a plug for Ethan's Twitter. He is continuing his Doctor Who rewatch with some fantastic analysis and clips. If you want to find him on Twitter, he's at Ethan_LMP. I highly recommend following him if you are any kind of Doctor Who fan. Excellent content.
And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it is at _Ethan_Luke. So there we go.
There you go. Watch the follows rack up, my friend. And thank you, dear listener, for listening to another episode of Wholala. As always, we would love to keep the conversation going, particularly on an episode like this, because we want to hear what you think about the Doctor Who fandom. What do you think of online culture? What do you think of the representation on the show? You can always reach out to us on our Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, all of which are at Wholala Pod. And as always, you can rewatch old episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel, which is also at Wholala Pod.
Until next time.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you so much.
And we will see you soon.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.